This is a sugya that every Talmud Chacham, every budding Talmud Chacham, anyone who strives to be a Talmud Chacham has to deal with. To be honest, it's a sugya that pained me for years. Some sofer here in the Chumash, on the pasuk of Ahavta l'reacha kamocha, quotes Rabbi Akiva, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Ze klal gadol b'Torah. Ze klal gadol b'Torah. Ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Ze klal gadol b'Torah. You take a pasuk in Chumash, and Rabbi Akiva tells you this is a klal gadol b'Torah. All right, so the pashtus is that he's coming to tell you that Ahavta l'reacha kamocha is central. Ahavta l'reacha kamocha is one of the fundamentals. It's not just another mitzvah. Comes some sofer and says, no, you got to read it carefully. Ahavta l'reacha kamocha, ze klal gadol. When is this a klal gadol? When is the rule of kamocha, total equality? When is this the end all? Ze klal gadol b'Torah. Only when it comes to Talmud Torah. Because we know the mitzvah of Ahavta l'reacha kamocha includes all of chesed. Be there for everybody. Be sensitive to everybody. Don't hurt anybody, and in the positive, see what you can do to help people. But the halacha is like another Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, Chayecha kodmim. The classic Machlokas Rabbi Akiva and Ben Petura. Two men in the desert. They have one jug of water. If they both drink, neither will make it to civilization. They'll both end up dying in the desert. If one drinks, it'll take him further. He'll make it to civilization. He'll survive, but his friend won't. What do? Ben Petura says, let them both drink. Let neither be responsible for the death of his friend. Comes Rabbi Akiva and says, V'chei achicha imach, your brother shall live alongside you, which means your concern for yourself has to come first. If you are the one carrying the jug, don't share it, drink, survive. It's tragic, it's painful, but you have a responsibility to take care of yourself first. So much so, it's an interesting marsha in Shabbos. We read the story in Shabbos of these two non-Jews this one non-Jew who comes to Hillel and Shammai. He asks Shammai, convert me while I'm standing on one foot. Shammai sends him away. Comes to Hillel, and Hillel tells him, Da'aloch sonei lechavercha lo saved. What you don't want done to you, don't do to others. Idech perusha, that was the whole Torah. The rest is just expounding on it. Zil Gemara, now go learn the rest of it. So the Marsha asks, why did he say Da'aloch sonei lechavercha lo saved, which is the negative? Why didn't he quote a pasuk of Chumash? V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Says the Marsha, if you take a look at the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, the greatest of the Tanoim, Yonasan ben Uziel, in his translation of the pasuk v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, he writes Da'aloch sonei lechavercha lo saved. He doesn't write the positive; he writes the negative. Says the Marsha, why? Because the rule in the positive depends on the circumstances. The halach is like Rabbi Akiva, chayecha kodmim. You are not to go and put yourself out for someone else in a way that it's going to affect you negatively. Sure, we make sacrifices, but you got to know where to draw the line. In fact, there's another pasuk. Efes ki lo yeh v'cha evyon. When you give tzedakah, you're not allowed to make yourself poor. By the way, the Chafetz Chaim writes, if when you give tzedakah, you're not to make yourself poor, then when you're not dealing with tzedakah, you certainly can't make yourself poor. You're not to be irresponsible in the way you invest, and you're certainly not supposed to waste your money. So when the Torah says, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, it doesn't mean there's total equality. Your responsibility for yourself comes first. Says Marsha, That's why Hillel had to say the pasuk, not in the way it's written in the Chumash, but in what it means in dollars and cents. And that is, Dalach Sani Lechavercha Lo Saved, be sensitive to other people's needs. Be sensitive to other people's, as the Rambam puts it, physical needs, financial needs, emotional needs. Don't harm them physically, don't harm them financially, and don't harm them emotionally either. In the positive, depends on the case, depends on the expense. Says the Chassam Sofer, so the only time that there's total equality is by Torah. When it comes to Torah study, your obligation for someone else is no different than your own. You don't come first. There's no chayecha kodmin. You don't say, no, I have to sit and learn. I don't have the time to go and learn with someone else. I don't have the time to teach because I'm still growing. You're not allowed to say that. Total equality. There's no chayecha kodmin. Sounds great. Heartwarming. Ramosha Feinstein in the Tshuva argues with him. By the way, he's not alone. There were those before Moshe that say the same thing and bring the same proof he does. Moshe says it's not true. The halach is chayecha kodmim in everything, including your learning. Now, Rav Moshe acknowledges that there seems to be a very clear chazal, a very, very clear chazal that support the Chassam Sofer. It's the story of Rav Preda. It's in Eruvin. It's Daf Nun Daled. Rav Preda had a Talmud. It took him a long time to get things. Every halacha Rav Preda taught him, he had to teach him 400 times. 400 times. That wasn't enough. One day, Rav Preda had an appointment. There was a Dvar Mitzvah that came up, and Rav Preda would have to leave. The Talmud knew that after Rav Preda is done, he's going to be leaving. He still taught him his 400 times, but his Talmud didn't get it. He tells Rav Preda, in my mind, every time you taught me, I told myself, but you're about to leave. I didn't have the peace of mind. So Rav Preda said, forget it, I'm not leaving until you get it. And he taught him another 400 times. So it says a voice came from heaven, a bas kol came out, and asked Rav Preda, what do you want? I give you a choice. You can either choose to bring this entire generation into Olam Haba, or 400 years of life. Rav Preda chose to take his whole generation into Olam Haba, and the bas kol said, you get both. And he ended up living, Rav Preda lived another 400 years. At the end of the day, he didn't lose. He lived for 400 years. But he didn't know that at the time he was teaching. Rav Preda had nothing better to do than teach the same halacha 400 times to this one Talmud who just wasn't getting it? I mean, is that not the greatest support for the Chassam Sofer? That it's more important, or at least equally important, to teach someone else as it is to learn yourself? So Moshe acknowledges that. But he says, I've got a problem. It's a Beferish Gemara, not like the Chassam Sofer. So what's his Beferish Gemara? So this sugya, the sugya in Kedushin, and we're going to have to learn this in a little more detail, because Rav Moshe claims that it's a clear proof against the Chassam Sofer. Rav Moshe himself ends up saying, well, we see from Rav Preda that you can't just sit and learn without teaching others. So he says you got to give meiser. It's probably the same as your money. If you've got to give like 10% to tzedakah, so you should be giving 10% of your time to teaching others. Well, which, by the way, Rav Moshe's tshuva is good enough. If every Orthodox Jew would give 10% of his time to teach people who don't know, the Jewish nation would look a lot different. the Jewish nation would look a lot different. Just going by Reb Moshe, there's at least an obligation to give meiser. It's nice. There are plenty of Orthodox Jews, some learning full-time, some learning part-time, to know that they've got to give of their time, not just to study themselves, but everyone who can is required to teach. In terms of the definition of who can, something that Reb Noach taught us that no one else really believed in was that if you know one piece of Torah, you now have something to teach. There's no minimum. There's no minimum. So let's begin with Reb Moshe. Everyone's got to give at least 10% of their time to teach others. But that's just the beginning. So I have to be honest. I was growing up in the yeshiva system. When you get to a certain age, you get independent in your learning. And then there's an interesting relationship between yeshivas and rebbeim and talmidim. On the one hand, there's still so much you can get from a rebbe, and there's a lot you can get from a yeshiva. On the other hand, your presence in the yeshiva also makes a difference. There always comes a point, I shouldn't say always, depends on the yeshiva you're in, but there comes a point where I guess one feels that they've sort of outgrown their yeshiva and would like to move on to greener pastures, to a higher level place. The feeling is that they can grow so much more. But when they're at that stage, they do a lot for the yeshiva they're in. Their presence in the yeshiva makes such a difference. They then become the highest level. And if every time they formed a group up on that level, they would leave the yeshiva and go elsewhere, there would never be anyone to look up to in the yeshiva other than the Rosh Yeshiva. And that's very limiting. Because as much as our Rosh Yeshivas inspire us, we are inspired a lot more from peers that are a few notches up. Because we know that that's easily doable. Just a matter of time. There's always the question, what do you tell these Talmid? Move on, or do you tell them to stay? And you find this all over the world. And from what I understand, this happened in Europe as well. In the days before the war, where the yeshivas were really flourishing, there was always a question of stay where you are or move on. And there was something of a hierarchy of the various yeshivas. Some were, the elite from all the different yeshivas used to get together. Do you go join them or do you stay where you are? So I remember at a certain stage in my life where I was pained by that question. And my rebbeim, they were in disagreement. The ones that weren't so involved with where I was at said, move on. And the ones I was close to said, you've got to stay. And the ones that said, move on, said, it's a beferish halacha, chayecha kodmim. Your life comes first. So listen, I was a teenager. Something didn't sit well. Chayecha kodmim in Torah did not sit well with me. But I can't say I was holding in a place that I could go argue with Rav Moshe, nor am I there today. But the Chassam Sofer said, Chayecha Kodmim doesn't exist. And Rav Moshe disagreed with him. And the question is, which way do you go? I was pained by this over the years, till I arrived at the Mir in Yerushalayim. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz Zechrono Levracha. He learned day and night, and he had all kinds of chavrusas. How did you become Reb Chaim's chavrusa? So I found out what the secret was. You knock on the door and ask Reb Chaim if he'd learn with you. He never said no. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz knew Kallah Torah Kula, had an absolutely brilliant mind. He learned with all kinds of people. He learned with all kinds of people. He had one chavrusa that they said was on a level that really understood him. As far as everybody else, they didn't come close. They just didn't come close. And Reb Chaim used to say, wisdom is a gift from heaven. How do you think you will merit getting that wisdom? By locking yourself in a room and being selfish, or by sharing? That's what he did. Anyway, I felt I was in the right place. Now la halacha. So that was my introduction. Yes, I was biased when I started the sugi. I was absolutely biased. I will not hide that. But let's learn. The sugi in Kiddushin is the Mishnah. The Mishnah, what you have here is the Brisa, but there's the Mishnah, where the Mishnah talks about of mitzvahs haben al ha'av. There are certain mitzvahs that are really the son's mitzvah, but they are the father's obligation to carry out. What are they? So the Brisa talks about it. Tana Rabbanan, ha'av chayev bivno lamolo. The father has a chiyuv to circumcise his son. We all think that it's a father's mitzvah only to circumcise his son, a bris milah. The truth is that it is the son's mitzvah himself, but that mitzvah is fulfilled by the father. If the father refuses, then all of Klal Yisrael has to see to it that he is circumcised. It was known, Rav Kook and Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld together, the chief rabbi and the head of the Eidah Charedis, for anyone who knows their politics, the two of them used to go around to the various non-frum moshavim and kibbutzim, circumcising the kids. It becomes a chiyuv on everybody. It's the son's mitzvah. It's the son's mitzvah. But the obligation is first on the father and then on everybody else. Lifdoso. This is another one. Pidyon haben. So everyone knows, a pidyon haben, what do you mean? You've got to go and redeem your son. It's really the son's mitzvah. The ceremony doesn't look like it. The Kohen asks the father, B'mai bo'is tfei, what would you prefer? Your son or the money? You're not given a choice. You have to answer, I want my son, here's the money. But it looks as though you are redeeming your son, meaning the question is, do you get to keep your son or not? It has to do with who owns the son. That's not it. Ever since the Leviim took over from the Bechoros, instead of the firstborn being the ones that would do the avoda, it was the Leviim and the Kohanim. So every Bechor owes it to a Kohen to redeem himself. It starts at 30 days, day 31 that is. It's the son's mitzvah. However, it is incumbent upon the father to do that for his son. When the son reaches bar mitzvah, his father hasn't redeemed him, it's the son who does it. He couldn't do it before because he's a katan who is not yet chayiv mitzvahs. So again, this is the son's mitzvah on the father. Ulalamdo Torah. The Brisa says another one. It is the father's mitzvah, I mean, it is the son's mitzvah to study Torah, and it is the father that carries out the mitzvah by teaching him. Meaning the son is supposed to teach himself, and the father is the one who carries out the mitzvah. That's what it sounds like from this Brisa. Ulahasio isha. To marry him off. It's the son's mitzvah. It's the father who's got to do that. And by the way, it's clear from the Gemara that that is not limited till bar mitzvah. The father has to go see to it that the son gets married when he's older, not necessarily bar mitzvah. The age the Gemara was talking about was more of 18. But it is the father who has to go and take care of arranging, finding someone for his son to marry, and financing it. But it's his son's mitzvah to get married. It is the father's obligation to see to it that it happens. Ulalamda umnis, also to teach him a trade, so that his son does not turn into a bandit, so that his son can support himself and not go steal money instead. V'yesh omrim afla shito b'mayim. Others say you've also got to teach your kid to swim. It is his obligation to see to it that he can save his own life, but it's the father who has the mitzvah when the son is young to see to it that he learns to swim. What's the v'yesh omrim? The question is, not everybody is near water. Is this really a daily necessity? Question mark. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kol she'eino malamed es b'no umnes malamdo listos. Anyone who doesn't teach his son a trade is teaching him to be a robber. Listos al kedaitach. What, he's teaching him to be a robber? Ela ki ilu malamdo listos. It is equivalent to teaching him to be a robber because there's no other way he's going to survive. All right, that was the Bryce. Now we go on, and the Gemara brings another Bryce. Tana Rabbana. Who lived those of no lived those? What happens if somebody's got a firstborn, but this somebody's father never made him a pidyon haben? A simple case. Somebody becomes frum at a point where he's already married and has a son who is not yet bar mitzvah. The father's a firstborn, the son's a firstborn. The father was never redeemed, the son has to be redeemed. The father only has enough money to redeem one. Who comes first? Who kodem livno? He comes first. Rabbi Yehuda Omer beno kodmo. He says his son comes first. Shezeh mitzvah so alaviv, zeh mitzvahs beno alav. Because this one's father should have redeemed him. It's the father's responsibility. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, no. Hakol modim kol echad elekel chamesh sloim. If there are only 5 sloim, who kodem livno? My timer, mitzvah de gufei adifa. The mitzvah of redeeming himself comes before the mitzvah of redeeming his son. Okay, that's the way the Gemara comes out. Mitzvah de gufei adifa. His own mitzvah comes first. Got that straight? Next Tana Rabban, another brayso. Hu lilmod uv no lilmod. He could only afford to either go study Torah himself and send his son to work. In those days, child labor was the norm. It was understood that you don't send a child to work until he's 6 years old. A 6-year-old was capable of going to work. So he has a choice. He can either go to work and have his 6-year-old sit and learn, or he's going to sit and learn, and a 6-year-old will go to work. Who kodem livno? His own Torah comes first, let his son go to work. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, and this is something we will deal with, I guess, on Thursday's shir, in beno zariz umamulach, if his son, zariz means he's more of a character, he's more with it, but mulach literally means he's salted. In other words, he's got what it takes. He's got more seichel. The Talmudo miskayim biyado, and his son has a better memory, beno kodem. Then his son would come first. That's another sugya. Mirz Hashem will deal with it. But this sugya, what does it say here? It says that he comes before his son. Says Reb Moshe, if you come before your son, then you certainly come before strangers. Finished. The Chassam Sofer's wrong. If your own son doesn't come before you, then how could you say a stranger does? That is Rav Moshe's kasha, and Rav Moshe is not the first. I found there are other svarim that take the same approach before him. Less known svarim, but their early svarim, they brought the same raya. So again, I was biased when I started this, but I really think that if you learn through the sugya, the halacha is not that way. Now, how can I say such a thing? I am not in any way imagining that I come to Rav Moshe Feinstein's toenails. However, the halacha is that if you learn a sugya well, and you come out a certain way, you're supposed to live by it. I agree that there was some bias here. But I still think this is pshat in the Gemara, and see what you think. Okay? What did the Gemara say? Who kodem livno? He comes before his son. Let his son go to work, he should come first. When the Lavush brings this halacha, he says, perhaps all of us could have said this, but the Lavush says straight out, Hayahut sarich lilmod, v'yesh lo ben lilmod, ve'en yodo maseges la'aspik lishnehem. He has enough money for one to learn. Im shnehem shavim, if they're both equal, hu kodem livno. Why is that? The mitzvah de gufei odif. Those words are familiar. These are the same words that were used by the Gemara in explaining why in Pidyon Haben, why it is that you come before your own son. And what did mitzvah de gufei odif mean? Let's backtrack. How does it work in Pidyon Haben? We said it is the son's mitzvah. It is incumbent upon the father, while his son is a katan, to fulfill his son's mitzvah. Whereas his own pidyon is his own mitzvah. Your own mitzvah comes before your obligation for someone else's mitzvah. Right? That's what the Gemara meant. So the Lavush is saying that for Talmud Torah also. So let's understand what that means. The Brisa put Talmud Torah in under the list of all of those things where the mitzvah is on the son, but the one who fulfills it is the father. So the Lavush is understanding that the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is the son's mitzvah. But the father is the one that makes it happen. So in teaching his son, he's really doing his son's mitzvah. When he teaches himself, he's doing his own mitzvah. Therefore, teaching himself comes first. Okay? That's what it sounds like. When you look at the achronim in the sugya, you come to realize that it's not really that way. And when you only think of it, it seems quite straightforward. So let's first read the Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch says, Kishem shemitzvah lolamed es beno, kach mitzvah lolamed es ben beno. The Rambam writes this, Shenemer, and it's a Gemara, V'odatim levanecha v'levnei v'necha, v'lo leben beno benavad. Not only is there a mitzvah to teach your son and your grandson, ela mitzvah al kol chacham Yisrael, every chacham in Kallah Yisrael, lelamed letalmidim, to teach students. Shegam heim nikroim banim, they're also called children. Where's he getting that from? The Gemara says, V'shinantom levonecha elu hatalmidim. Ela shemitzvah laktim beno v'leven beno, ben beno leben chavero. The order of precedence would be your son, your grandson, everybody else. Next halacha. Chayiv lahaskir malamed libno lalamdo. You have an obligation to hire a rebbe to teach your son. Aval ben chavero eno chayiv lahaskir. You do not have the obligation to hire a rebbe to teach somebody else. Okay, so that there's the halacha gimel and halacha dalid are dealing with two situations. The first is the obligation to teach. The second is the obligation to finance someone's education. In Sif Gimel, it's telling us the mitzvah to teach includes your son, your grandson, and everybody. Whereas in Sif Dalet it says the obligation to finance Torah education is only for your son and not for strangers. Okay? For strangers it would be called tzedakah. For your son it's an obligation. Okay? The Gra in the Bira Gra, as always, explains the source. What is the source to this? That the obligation to finance is something that you've got for a son. Whereas when it comes to somebody else, you don't have that obligation. Says the Gra, and the Vilna Gaon is always brilliant in everything he does. So the Gra contrasts the mitzvah of Talmud Torah with the mitzvah of Milah. The Gemara tells us that if someone refuses to circumcise his son, all of Klal Yisrael has the obligation. So the Gra asks, why do we not find such a Gemara discussing the case where someone refuses to teach his son Torah? The Gemara should tell us that it then becomes everyone else's obligation to teach his son Torah. The same way it said it on Bris Milah, why doesn't it say that in Talmud Torah? Says the Gra, Lo amru kenetza lalamdo. They didn't say that under the mitzvah lalamdo. Daha hakol mitzuvim keniskar le'el in Sif Gimel. When it comes to the obligation of circumcising someone else's child, whose mitzvah is the mitzvah of Milah? The child's mitzvah. The Mishnah taught us that the father has an obligation to carry out his son's mitzvah by circumcising him. If he didn't, then I would have said, wait till he becomes a bar mitzvah and he'll circumcise himself. Says the Gemara, a chiddush. Everybody's got to do it. Everyone's got to. When it comes to Talmud Torah, why do I have to teach my son? It's not because it's my son's obligation to learn and it's his mitzvah upon me. There's a pasuk in the Torah that says, V'limatem osam es b'nechem. Teach your children. Now, what if I don't want to do that? There's another pasuk in the Chumash, V'shinamtem lavanecha. Teach your talmidim, which means to teach everybody. It's not the son's mitzvah that's incumbent upon the father, and then we need a chiddush that, someone else will have the same obligation. It is the father's mitzvah to teach his son, and it's everybody else's mitzvah to teach that very son, because everyone has an obligation to teach everybody. We don't need a Gemara telling us that if the father refuses, everyone else has to teach him. Open your Chumash. So again, what's the Gra saying? He's saying that the mitzvah of teaching your son is not mitzvahs haben al ha'av. It is the father's own mitzvah. Similarly, when someone else teaches your son, he is fulfilling his own mitzvah. V'shinantam levanecha elu atalmidim. The mitzvah of Milah is the son's mitzvah, but the Torah has taught us that you go ahead and do it for him because he's 8 days old. Whereas Talmud Torah, we all have mitzvahs of teaching. Says the Gra now, and here's where the genius comes out. So when the Brisa says that Talmud Torah is an example of mitzvahs haben ala av, what is it referring to? It couldn't be referring to the teaching. That's not mitzvahs haben ala av. That's mitzvahs ha'av. So what is the Brisa referring to? Says the Gra, Ela b'schar komairi. It's referring to the financing. It's the same as lahasio isha. The mitzvah of the son is to get married. The father's mitzvah is not to get married. The father's mitzvah is to enable the son to get married, to give him whatever money it takes to get married. Here too in Talmud Torah, the obligation to learn is the father's obligation to teach and everybody else's obligation to teach. Financing, that's mitzvah haben ala'av. Wow. So in the Birkas Shmuel, Reb Baruch Ber, the Rosh Yeshiva of all the Rosh Yeshivas, he says that his son-in-law, Reb Reuven Grozovsky, actually, he had a chakira, he wasn't sure. This halacha of teaching one's son, is this mitzvah ha'av, a mitzvah haben ala'av? Am I fulfilling my son's obligation, meaning it's his mitzvah, but I'm doing it for him? Or is this my own? Says Reb Baruch Ber, it's a beferish bir hagra. The Gra is telling us that when it comes to teaching your son, that is your obligation. It's not his, it's your obligation. When it comes to teaching someone else's son, that's also your obligation. Financing, that's mitzvah ben ala'av, and that's only halacha of ben ala'av, which is how the Shulchan Aruch knew that doesn't apply to anybody else. Okay? Now, if that's the case, I would like us to revisit Rav Moshe's Raya. What did the Gemara say? Who lilmod, uvno lilmod? Who kodim? Why? And the Lavush told us, just in case we didn't figure it out ourselves, this is a parallel to the Gemara just before this, because this is his own mitzvah, as opposed to the son, where it's the son's mitzvah that's incumbent upon him. What are we talking about? We're not talking about the obligation to learn. The son's obligation to learn and my obligation to teach, they're independent. I have to teach him because that's my mitzvah. What's the Gemara talking about? The Gemara, the Brisa, is talking about a case where there's not enough money to go around. It's a question of paying for my son's education or paying for my education. Financing education, that we said was mitzvah haben ala'av. Paying for my education is my own mitzvah. Paying for my son's education is mitzvah haben ala'av. It's his mitzvah that I carry out. My own mitzvah comes first. The Gemara is very good. How about actual learning where the issue isn't money? The issue is time. The issue is, do I sit and learn myself or do I teach? That doesn't go into this brisa. That's not what this brisa is talking about. They're both my mitzvah. I have a mitzvah v'shinantam l'vanecha, I have a mitzvah l'matim osam ezbnechem. I also have another mitzvah. The Gemara says, lo limdo aviv. There's another pasuk. L'matem osam u'shmartem lasosam. Another mitzvah to study yourself. So I have one mitzvah, l'matem osam u'shmartem lasosam. I have another mitzvah, l'matem osam ezbnechem. They're both my mitzvahs. Who is to say that I come first? Where does it say chayecha kodmim? I think this is so clear. I think this is so clear. When it comes to the actual mitzvah of teaching versus learning, they are equal. The same obligation I have to study myself, I've got to teach. They are both mitzvahs aseh, they're incumbent upon me. It's not someone else's mitzvah that I'm doing. Financing, that's something else. That's mitzvah haben ala'av. That's a whole different thing. Financing? Yeah. If it's a question of paying for a rebbe for myself or paying for a rebbe for my son or a stranger, so the halacha is, this is my mitzvah, the other one is my son's mitzvah. That's a different story. I think this is halacha l'maisa. I think this is halacha l'maisa. The Chassam Sofer is right. There is no chayecha kodmim when it comes to Talmud Torah. So what is there? On the Shinantam Levanecha, the Lashon of the Rambam is mitzvah kol chochom b'Yisrael. On every chochom. It's simple that if we tell everybody, as soon as they learn their first halacha, everyone's going to be out there teaching. That means everybody. You know, everyone goes to yeshiva, you learn one halacha, now go and teach it. All right, they'll come back and they'll learn another halacha. How far is anyone going to get? The level of learning in the entire Kallah Yisrael will remain at a certain point and not too much higher. It's obvious that if we want Kallah Yisrael to be holding in a better place, we have to allow people to sit and learn and then come and teach. So they'll be able to teach so much more. Where do you draw the line? I'll tell you, you can draw whatever you want, as long as you're honest. You've got to learn and learn and learn and learn and learn why. Of course, you have a mitzvah to learn. Of course, you want to ingest as much of Hashem's wisdom as you can. There's no greater relationship you can have with Hashem himself than by incorporating his wisdom into your brain, your attitudes, your personality, whom you are. That's the greatest. That's the greatest. It's the closest we can get to a physical connection to Hashem. Ingesting his intelligence, ingesting his wisdom. There's no question about it. But we don't have the luxury of just doing that and sitting in a little corner and feeling great being close to Hashem. We have an obligation to teach. You have to learn so that you'll be big, so that you'll be able to share, so you'll be able to give. In all of our learning, so long as you are growing with the goal of sharing, keep growing. Be as big as you can. So let everyone stay in yeshiva forever. Halavai, that would be a reality. How many people can stick it out without teaching, just emotionally, without burning out? Without, when it's new, when you're young, there's an enthusiasm and it's great. After a while, as exciting as it is, unless you're a Chazon Ish or a Rav Elyashiv or a Chaim Kanievsky, it's not the same. Older guys in Kollel are operating at half speed. They drink more coffees and teas every day. It's not the same. At that point, I'd say not only at that point, a little bit before that point, you got to go and share. Every Jew has to know there's a mitzvah to study and there's a mitzvah to teach. And the mitzvah to teach is our obligation. This is our mitzvah. And there's no chayecha kodmim. The reason why you can study and not run out and teach immediately is not for you. There's no chayecha kodmim. You don't come first. It's for them. It's for them. They deserve someone bigger. You're growing. You're becoming great. Wonderful. Become greater and greater and going to go out there and make a difference. That's what it's about. Nobody has the liberty of saying, I want to learn. It's an obligation to teach. In terms of leaving one's yeshiva to go somewhere else, the issue is not chayecha kodmin or not. The issue is, where am I going to be doing more of a service for Kallah Yisrael, for teaching others, by moving on or by staying? If my being here is going to help elevate a bunch of people, then perhaps that's better. My moving on will make me greater and I'll be able to help people on a higher level, okay? But that's the way you make your decision. Not on the basis of me versus them and chayecha kodmim. The Rebbeim who told me chayecha kodmim are no longer alive. But I so much would want to go back and show them this. It's equal. Yes, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Total equality, ze klal godel, in one thing only in Torah. Total equality. Comes to your finances, you got to take care of yourself first. Comes to your health, you got to take care of yourself first. Even your emotional well-being, you got to take care of yourself first. Torah, the whole cheshbon is, myself, others, everybody, all is equal. What's going to be more efficient? If I become bigger, it'll be better for them, great. Then that wins. If that's not where I'm at, then go teach. The obligation to teach is not doing anybody a favor. It's not fulfilling someone else's obligation for them. It's not that they should have been sitting and learning, but I've got to go and teach them instead because they're not doing it. It's not that their parents should have taught them and didn't, and therefore I have to teach them. It's because I have an obligation to Hashem. Avishinantam levanecha, to teach banecha elu talmidim. This is my personal obligation. And there's no reason why I come before anybody else. Let's be clear. Now this is all in Talmud Torah. There's another sugya. Although the Chassam Sofer doesn't say it here, he is quoted. The Shlita of the Chassam Sofer is quoted as there's no chayecha kodmim when it comes to ruchnius altogether. Not just Talmud Torah. Now that's a much bigger sugya. It's a much more difficult sugya. That we're going to leave for Thursday. But when we come back to it on Thursday, I hope you will have absorbed this well now. Spend your time and let it resonate within you. Learning's great. The obligation to teach is equal. You know, Hashem created this world. And He created this world in a way that will accommodate doing what's right and being successful. The fact of the matter is that when you teach, your own learning is so much better. Even though you're teaching on a whole different level. I tell people this, I have to share my personal experience. I was in the mirror. We had a great chabura. Our voice is sitting here. We had people of his caliber. He's older and wiser than I am. You know, we had two people who today are famous Marbitzei Torah. They were part of our chabura. It was Gan Eden. I came here. My friends thought either I was crazy or I was desperate for parnasa. They didn't know how much I was making. I guess if they knew how much I was making, they'd only say I was crazy. Which wasn't such a surprise to them. My first shiur was Gemara for people that had never opened a Gemara before. They were a tough group, and I have to share this story with you. Not going to mention any names, but they're well known in Aish today. As I was about to start, so one of them said he's got to say something in the name of everyone there. We don't know why we should be learning Gemara. We're giving you 2 weeks to make us understand that. Okay? It was a challenge. I was not ready for this one. So, all right, we started teaching Gemara. I started teaching Gemara. I made a quick decision then. It was Bava Basra's man. Now, for those of you that are familiar, the first parak, a lot of nice, interesting things in. The second parak is murder. Lo Yachbar, the sugyas of Niskei Shchenim. I decided we got to learn the second parak. This is going to be a challenge. Let's see what happens. Baruch Hashem, after 2 days, they asked for an extra hour of Gemara. This is a real challenge. First of all, I had to explain everything in English. Coming from yeshiva, that's not easy. It also meant that I had to explain things on a level where people that were not familiar with all sorts of concepts would be able to understand that it would make sense to them. That was another challenge. Teaching Gemara to beginners, I felt that I grew that year as much as I did in my first year in the Mir, where I picked up a completely new derech halimud, which changed my life. I felt that this year, that first year here, I had grown as much. This isn't Gemara. I'll tell you, you're going to teach Emunah, then you'll be a Maimon. Whatever it is that you teach, you're going to know so much better than when you learned it yourself. So learn, know, become great. Your goal is to share. Your goal is Vishinantam Levanecha Elu Talmidim. And even in the interim, every opportunity you've got to share something you know, in a way that you know you can reach the minds and hearts of whoever you're speaking to. Don't pass up the opportunity. The mitzvah of Vishinantam Levanecha, teach. Teach. It is no less important for sure than your own obligation to study. For the rest of Ruchnius, stay tuned on Thursday.